Hey there, I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, the Chinese Communist Party begins its 20th Party Congress on October 16, one that's most likely going to secure Xi Jinping an unprecedented third term. For today, let's break down what the upcoming Party Congress will mean for China in terms of leadership reshuffle in the top ranks. Here's also why the Party Congress is being closely watched. That's because it reveals the big leadership or the new members of the Politburo Standing Committee or the PSC. Now, the most common question being asked is whether or not Xi Jinping will get a third term on PSC. The answer to this is an obvious and emphatic yes, but it throws light on some more interesting and lesser known aspects. To begin with, anyone aged above 68 at the time of the Party Congress is moved into retirement. This is an unspoken rule of the PSC. Interestingly, Xi Jinping is already 69 years old, and with him all set to be elected for a third term, the usual two-term norm will be abrogated. As a result, the 10-year limit for top leaders will be dropped, essentially making Xi Jinping a president for life. Basically, there will no longer be a prevention to the increasing number of elderly figures in the CCP leadership, leaving barely any room for young leaders. And that brings us to the next question. What will be the scope for young leaders in CCP? Will age limits shift or disappear altogether? And what happens to 7 up, 8 down rule? Now, you may want to ask, what is this rule all about? 7 up, 8 down refers to the convention that if a Politburo Standing Committee member is 68 or older at the time of a party congress, he or she must retire. But if she or he is 67 or younger, he or she may still enter the committee. What's noteworthy is that since 2002, no PSC member has been reappointed at 68 or beyond, or even retired at the age of 67 or younger. Also, the people who make it to China's top leadership will be closely examined for their factional affiliation and relationship dynamics with Xi Jinping. Basically, meaning how many within the PSC will be from the rival faction. But above all, is Xi Jinping leaving any hopes for a young leader in the waiting? There are already concerns regarding the lack of young blood on the PSC. Foreign analysts blame Xi Jinping for stunting the growth of China's next generation leaders. Let's also try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of what the upcoming National Congress in China will mean for the country's leadership. And for that, I'm joined in by expert on China's political affairs, Ainar Tangen. Many thanks to you, Ainar, for joining us today. Of course, the first question that comes to my mind is, with possibilities of Xi Jinping taking over for a third term, the question that arises is, what will happen to age limits? Will they be amended or removed altogether?
Okay, so you need to have a little bit of history to understand these term limits. There's nothing that's written into, the Constitution or anything like that that talks about term limits or ages. Actually, under Jiang Zemin's time, the age limit was pushed down a couple of times. The age limit was put there so that Politburo members would not stay on until literally they passed away, because that was an option at one point. So they started having these informal rules that said you should step down after this age. So at this juncture, you have to think of the Politburo, the top echelon of the pyramid leadership, as 3 distinct parts. One, you have the chairman, and in this particular case, the term limits are not going to apply to him. Then you have the standing committee, and then at the bottom, you also have the Politburo. So at this juncture, it looks like the age rule, which you mentioned, the 68 you retire, 67 you can stay, at the time of the party conference, that those who are aging out will leave. That includes Liu He, who's a very close, confidant, and working partner of Xi Jinping. and they will bring on a new set of leaders. It's necessary because they have to bring the next generation along so that they're prepared. The idea is that you should do 5 years on the standing committee before ascending to one of the top positions, either the premier or the president. So that's where it stands right now. There's a lot of confusion of it, a lot of misinformation, but those are the simpler facts.
And there's already talk of the lack of young blood within the PSC. Will the 20th Congress have any picks who can be hoped to take the mantle from Xi Jinping, or is Xi now going to be president for life?
Well, it's not clear at this juncture. I mean, there's a number of things that can happen. First, they can keep the standing committee at 7. All right, but regardless of that, as I was referring to earlier, you're going to lose about 10 people from the 25 member Politburo, which includes the standing committee, and at the top of that is the president. So at this juncture, they could either keep it at 7. There are a couple of people who will be aging out, including Li Jianchu, who's head of the NPC. It's probable that the current premier, Li, will stay and that he will take over the NPC. That is the latest speculation. But it still makes room and then another gentleman will also be leaving there, but it still makes room for one more, at least, possibly 2. Then you have the option of expanding the standing committee, because it was 9 before Hu Jintao, when Hu Jintao was there, and then it was reduced to 7 when Xi Jinping came, but it could be expanded. And this is an example. The leadership structure is not set in stone. There are a set of agreements and protocols. At this juncture in time, the overwhelming consensus among the leadership and the party is that they don't want to make sudden moves. They sense that they are in a time of very, very difficult circumstances with trade wars, with U.S. sailing ships up and down the Taiwan Strait, selling arms to Taiwan, a global recession, a pandemic. These are not the times to be making big moves. They want to be very cautious. So keeping Xi Jinping on is basically the consensus move by everybody. It's not that everybody's happy with him, but he is by far the strongest leader that they've had in quite some time. In terms of the next generation, as I said, you have to bring them along. If you start looking at the ages of the 25 people on the Politburo, only 3 of them were born in the 60s. All the rest were born in the 50s. They will have to leave eventually, because they will age out. And when that happens, you have to have a new cadre in. Now, in terms of specific names, a lot of people have mentioned Mr. Hu. He's party secretary of Guangdong. You've also mentioned Mr. Yang. He is a previous party secretary of Guangdong and also on the Politburo. So, I mean, these are people who were born. The later one was born in the 50s. Mr. Hu was born in the 60s. That makes him easily a candidate for the next generation. But it is not without precedent for them to choose from beyond the Politburo itself to elevate other people. In fact, that's how Xi Jinping and Premier Li were selected. So there are other people floating around out there, but it's a consensus group. This is not a situation where Xi Jinping is going to say, I want this guy and that guy. There's a lot of very careful consideration that goes on, a lot of going back and forth. But in the end, it has to be a consensus decision. And as a result, no one gets exactly what they want, but they do agree on the general direction.
All right, many thanks to you, Einar Tangen, for speaking to us and sharing your precious insights with us here at CNN News 18.